Something almost no one expected happened in Iran. According to reports and statements from the camp of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the country was forced to put one of its most important weapons on the table, something they have fought for, protected, and endured severe sanctions for decades just to maintain their uranium program. According to Donald Trump in his statement on April 16, 2026, Iran allegedly agreed not to possess nuclear weapons and to surrender their stockpile of enriched uranium. He also added that the agreement was clear and solid. If this is true, it would be a major change for Tehran, because the uranium program is not just a simple project. This became the symbol of the regime's strength, the foundation of their influence in the region, and one of the IRGC's strongest bargaining chips. But before we continue, please like this video. This means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. According to the Manila Times, the stockpile that reached up to 60% enrichment is among those that need to be surrendered. This is a clear violation of Iran's long-standing red line. They have repeatedly said they would never give it up, but now it seems they have been forced to back down. A combination of pressure from military actions, economic blockade, and diplomatic negotiations pushed Iran to this point. For many, this is the first clear sign of the crumbling image of the IRGC as an unshakable force. But to understand how serious this is, we first need to go back and see why uranium is so important for Iran. According to the Arms Control Association in 2015, under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran's enrichment was limited to 3.67%. This is done at the Natanz nuclear facility. And there was also a limit on the size of the stockpile. At that time, Iran was complying with the agreement. But everything changed when the U.S. withdrew. In the deal during Trump's first term, Iran's enrichment level gradually increased from 20% up to 60%. And that's where the new phase of tension began, a phase that now seems to have reached its most dangerous point. By June 2025, according to reports, Iran's highly enriched uranium had reached more than 440 kilos. This is enough to make more than 10 nuclear warheads. At that point, what experts call breakout time had almost reached zero. This means that if Iran wants to, it can build a nuclear weapon in a very short period of time. This is what Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States have long feared. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, this uranium is no longer just stored in one place. It has been distributed to 3 underground facilities. The Natanz nuclear facility is buried inside a mountain, surrounded by thick concrete and lead shielding. The Isfahan nuclear facility is one of the most important facilities. A large portion of the stockpile is stored here, with tunnels that go deeper than 90 meters, and the Fordo fuel enrichment plant, built right inside the mountain, designed to withstand even direct bombing. According to the analysis of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the airstrikes by the U.S. and Israel in June 2025 caused significant damage. Many parts of the facilities were damaged and some uranium was buried under the debris. But there's one big problem. The uranium doesn't disappear. The uranium that has already been enriched to 60% doesn't just disappear or lose its enrichment level. It can remain in that state for hundreds of years. In short, the facilities were damaged, but the threat itself did not disappear. If Iran finds the time and resources, it can rebuild the entire program. And if that happens, the impact will be much greater. According to analyses, it's possible that Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey will follow the same path, a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. This is why, according to a report by the Washington Post, the Pentagon presented Donald Trump with a plan. Not just simple airstrikes, but a ground operation. Direct seizure of the uranium. In the plan, the 82nd Airborne Division would parachute into the territory. They would build a runway from scratch. They would clear hundreds of feet of rubble to reach the underground tunnels. After that, Delta Force and Navy SEALs would enter. Wearing hazmat suits, they would move slowly inside the facilities. Each uranium container would be inspected one by one. There are radiation sensors, and there could be traps. Every step has to be precise, because a single mistake could cause a disaster, not just in the region, but in the entire world. Imagine that scenario. An operation that needs to be carried out while missile fire continues for several weeks. According to the Wall Street Journal, only a few in the entire United States military have training for handling and recovering nuclear materials. This means that even if there is a plan, there aren't enough people who can do it. In addition, according to former defense officials, this kind of operation is even more complicated than the Normandy landings. It's possible on paper, but almost impossible in actual combat. And this is where the strategy changed. Instead of a direct attack, Donald Trump chose a quieter but more effective way. No gunfire, no deployment of special forces, just one move, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow body of water that's about 34 kilometers wide. But almost 20% of the world's oil trade passes through here. And most importantly, this is where Iran's lifeline passes through. More than 90% of Iran's maritime trade depends on this route. Not just oil, but food, raw materials, medicine parts, almost everything. According to a CNBC report, on April 13, 2026, the U.S. Navy declared a full blockade of Iranian ports in Hormuz, and the effect was immediate. Within the first 24 hours, not a single ship got through. According to the United States Central Command, they have completely halted Iran's maritime trade. Bloomberg confirmed that within 3 days, 14 ships tried to pass, and all of them were forced to turn back. Even China's support was not enough. According to Newsweek, almost 97% of Iran's oil goes to China. But even tankers related to China were turned back by U.S. destroyers. There was even one tanker, the Rich Starry, that almost made it into Hormuz. But eventually it was tracked and forced to return to the Persian Gulf. And it wasn't just oil that was affected. According to PBS analysis, most of Iran's food imports also travel by sea. Wheat, rice, cooking oil, ingredients for making medicine. In other words, it's not just the economy that's affected, but also the supply of daily necessities themselves. And here, the effect of the blockade became clear. This isn't just a simple military move. It's a direct cut to the lifeblood of Iran's entire system, a step taken without a single bullet. But it carries the same weight as a war. The blockade cut off everything. Before the people in Tehran could even feel the full effect, according to reports, the Iranian leadership itself had already started calculating. And what they saw was a clear countdown. Within 10 days, the entire country could possibly come to a halt. If you look at it from Iran's perspective, the problems are coming one after another. Air bases have been bombed. Nuclear facilities have been buried under rubble. The chain of command has been cut off. According to reports, some commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were hit in the strikes. There was also significant damage to missile production capacity. And most of all, the expected support from China and Russia did not materialize in any concrete form. Then came the worst, the complete cutoff of maritime trade. Its impact is not just economic, it's a matter of survival. According to analyses, within 10 days, oil production could stop, food supplies could run out, industries could halt, and the flow of money could dry up. At sea, according to reports, over 157 million barrels of Iranian oil were stranded, and almost all of it was supposed to go to China, but it couldn't leave. And here the most important question arose: is uranium more important, or the Strait of Hormuz? Because uranium is a bargaining chip, but Hormuz is directly tied to the regime's survival. When the income is cut off, what's the use of the nuclear program? If the country is starving, what is the value of enriched uranium? For many years, the IRGC considered uranium as a symbol of strength and resistance. But in the face of economic collapse, its significance faded. This is what made it clear why Iran was forced to negotiate, not because of an impossible commando operation, but because of time. The pressure brought by the blockade in Hormuz was what truly forced them. Time ran out, and the very first to realize this was Iran itself. But there is an important layer to this story, one that still doesn't have a clear answer. Now, this is where everything becomes more complicated. The question is, will this be quietly accepted inside Iran? Or will it start a new struggle within the government itself? Because there isn't just one center of power in Iran. At present, there are two forces that seem to be moving in opposite directions. On one side is Masoud Pezeshkian, a leader who, according to reports, has been pushing for a ceasefire since the beginning of the conflict. He warned that if the situation continues, it will reach a point where the economy will completely collapse within a few weeks. For him, the solution is practical. Surrender the uranium, lift the blockade, and keep the system alive. On the other hand, according to reports from Iran International, there's Ahmad Vahidi, a powerful figure within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. According to reports, he is blocking some presidential appointments, filling positions in the intelligence ministry, and influencing decisions on national security. In other words, he's not just following orders, but acting as if he's the one in control. According to a report by the Federal, Pezeshkian requested that executive power be returned to the civilian government, but this was firmly rejected. This is where the clash of two perspectives began. According to the IRGC, the problem was the lack of government reforms. According to Pezeshkian, it was the IRGC's aggressive strategy that was actually damaging the economy. Both sides had a point, but neither wanted to back down. And in the middle of all this, there was another important figure, Mojtaba Khamenei. According to reports, he took over after the death of his father, Ali Khamenei, on the first night of the war. On paper, he is the commander-in-chief. But in actual operations, it seems that control is in the hands of the IRGC, a clear power vacuum. And in this kind of situation, the influence of the military becomes stronger than that of the civilian leadership. Now put the decision about uranium in the middle of this. This might be acceptable, but the question is, does the IRGC have the same stance? Because uranium's not just a simple asset, it's a symbol of strength, a symbol of resistance, and a symbol of the regime's identity. If this is surrendered, it's not just an economic decision, it's an ideological retreat. And in this kind of system, such a move is often not accepted without something in return. The surrender of uranium is not a simple decision. For the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, it's like the very foundation of their beliefs collapsing. Because for many years, they used it as a symbol of strength and resistance. When they give it up, it's like erasing their own reason for fighting. Now, is it possible for them to sabotage this decision? In theory, yes. They can block access to the nuclear facilities. They can move the stockpile to another location. They can also reduce or hide the actual amount of uranium. But this is where the Donald Trump factor comes in. According to a CNBC report, from the very beginning, his position was clear: no backing down. He threatened severe consequences if Iran did not comply. And after those statements, he immediately enforced the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. So if Iran backs down now, it's easy to predict what will happen next. The blockade will get even tighter. The CSPAR might come to an end. And what used to be an impossible plan might suddenly become a reality. The deployment of the 82nd Airborne Division, along with Delta Force and Navy SEALs, will no longer just be a plan on paper. It will become an actual operation. At this point, the IRGC only has three possible courses of action left. First, accept giving up the uranium. This is painful for their identity, but the system still has a chance to survive. Second, block the decision and continue the fight. But this is a direct invitation for more intense U.S. action. Third, an internal coup. Oust the civilian leadership and take full control. But this could also completely bring down the regime. Of the three options, all three involve some kind of loss. There are no winners. But for now, it seems they are gradually being forced to choose the first option. Not because they want to, but because they have no other choice. According to the analysis of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, this has a significant impact on the entire region. If Iran loses its nuclear card, its entire network will weaken, from Hezbollah to the Houthis, Hamas, and militias in Iraq. It's not just Iran that will be affected, but the entire balance of power in the Middle East. And here it becomes even clearer that this fight is not just about one country. This is a fight that has an impact on the whole world. The so-called nuclear leverage is now gone. For many years, Groups allied with Iran have operated under the shadow of its nuclear capability. It's a form of protection, a silent threat. But now that shadow is slowly fading away. According to reports, Benjamin Netanyahu's move to allow ceasefire talks in Lebanon coincides with the reduction of Iran's nuclear threat. For Israel, this has been their biggest concern for a long time. And when it disappeared, it opened the door for diplomacy. Even Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, according to reports, breathed a sigh of relief. But inside Iran, a different story could unfold. Historically, this kind of diplomatic setback often causes turmoil within the country. During the Iranian Green Movement, massive protests broke out. This was followed by the 2019 Iranian protests and the Masa Amini protests. Each of these happened during times when the state was weak. But the current situation is even more severe in terms of the economy, military, and diplomacy. All of them are under pressure at the same time. In fact, the United States has other options. It could risk thousands of soldiers to extract the uranium underground, an operation even more complicated than the Normandy landings. But that wasn't what they chose. Instead, they closed the Strait of Hormuz. They used time as a weapon and waited for Iran to come to them. And when Iran arrived in Medina, it brought with it the very thing it once prided itself on, the uranium. Something that for 45 years they said they would never give up. But according to the Axios report, there is still no official confirmation from Iran until now, between Donald Trump's statement that an agreement has been reached and in the actual surrender of uranium, there is still a gap. And the biggest question now is, what will be the reaction of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps? Does their silence mean something? Is it acceptance or preparation for the next move? For now, the agreement on the table seems like just a piece of paper with ink that hasn't completely dried yet. And will this be the beginning of peace or a new chapter of tension? We will find out in the coming days. Something almost unexpected happened in Iran. And even though it was quiet, it seems the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was forced to accept it, even if only temporarily. But even though Iran has stepped back for now, other countries in the region are no longer waiting. According to reports, they have already started taking long-term steps to permanently avoid this situation in the future. New pipelines, large trade route projects, all with a single goal: to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. Because for a long time, control over this route has been Iran's strongest card. Now they're trying to take away its value. This is the beginning of a new chapter in geopolitics. It's no longer just a battle of weapons, but a battle of infrastructure. Some call it geoengineering wars. Instead of fighting the enemy in one place, the map itself is being changed. For example, instead of guarding a narrow passage, a new route is created so there's no need to pass through it anymore. When that passage disappears, the power of whoever controls it also disappears. In this way, you don't need to attack. You simply remove the reason for the fight. And this is what Tehran is facing now. For many years, the government used its ability to influence the global economy as a silent threat in negotiations. But if the world has another route, that leverage gradually disappears. When a player at the table suddenly loses his strongest card, the whole game changes. And often, this is the most dangerous moment because the loss of power, especially if sudden, puts pressure on the military and political leadership. But on the other hand, for the countries in the Arabian Peninsula, this is also the start of a new direction. More independent, more control over their own supply and routes, less reliance on a single choke point. In other words, the battle over Hormuz is not just about the current crisis. This could be the beginning of a change in how power works around the world. Now, it's clear that the role of the Gulf countries is changing. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are no longer just simple oil suppliers. They are gradually becoming rule makers, countries that can dictate how global trade will move. Instead of relying on a single route like the Strait of Hormuz, they are creating their own paths, pipelines, alternative routes, projects that can avoid any military threat from neighboring countries. This is the true form of sovereignty. It's not just control over territory, but also control over the flow of the economy. Yes, the costs are enormous. These projects cost hundreds of billions of dollars. But if the payoff is long-term security and a steady flow of energy, it becomes clear why this is being done. Because they're no longer just selling oil. What they're selling now is certainty, a promise that the supply will not be interrupted, a system that cannot be held hostage by any country. In this way, the map of the world is changed not just by war, but by construction, by steel, by infrastructure. And while water will continue to flow through Hormuz, its true significance in geopolitics may eventually disappear. Because if the most important trade no longer passes through here, it just becomes an ordinary passage, a former center of power that is gradually fading from the scene. On one hand, a decade-long strategy of pressure and leverage is quietly disappearing without a single shot being fired. And this is where the new chapter begins. A world with more routes, more options, and fewer choke points. Now, to your question about what will happen to Iran, it's not a simple yes or no. A more realistic scenario is that it will divide the system from within. The civilian leadership might accept the decision to keep the economy alive, but that doesn't mean the entire Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps will immediately follow. More likely, there will be internal tension, not an open clash right away, but a gradual power struggle. Because for the IRGC, this isn't just the loss of a strategy, it's the loss of an identity. If Iran fully accepts this direction, the regime will remain, but it will be weaker. If the IRGC fights back, the situation inside could get worse. So the real battle now is not just at sea, but inside Iran itself. And that's where it will be revealed which will prevail, survival or conviction. And if we dig even deeper into this discussion, there's another angle that's slowly emerging. Its effect on how leadership itself functions within these countries. Because in this kind of crisis, it's not just the strength of a country that's tested, but also the way it is governed. When pressure builds fast, decisions need to be made quickly. But if the decision is wrong, the effects come just as fast. And this is where leaders differ greatly. There are leaders who can quickly adjust quietly, without fanfare, but with the right timing. And there are leaders who stick to the old ways, even when the situation is changing. Now let's think about the effect of this inside Iran. While there's pressure from the outside, there's also pressure from within, from the people, businesses, the system, everything is gradually being affected. And in this kind of situation, a hard stance is not enough. Flexibility is also needed. You need to know how to step back when necessary, because sometimes stepping back doesn't mean defeat, but a way to recover. Now, there's another layer that needs to be considered, its effect on the future decisions of other countries. As they watch what's happening, they're learning what should be done and what should be avoided. For example, how important is it to have a backup plan? How important is it not to depend on just one system? And how important it is to have control over your own resources. You won't see it right away, but over time, this is what will change the way the world works. Because every crisis becomes a lesson. And every lesson becomes the basis for the next decision. In the end, we go back to a simple point. This fight isn't just about who has control now, but about who is more prepared for what happens next. Because in a world that changes quickly, the real advantage lies in the ability to keep up and adjust at the right time. And if we continue down this path, there's another subtle effect. The world's perspective on risk is changing. Before, the focus was on how to make money faster and more cheaply. But now what matters more is which option is more secure and more stable. And there's less chance of getting stuck. Because of this, many countries and companies have learned it's not enough to just be efficient. The system also needs to be resilient. In the coming years, people will choose not the cheapest option, but the safer one, a more cautious route with more backup. And in this way, the system gradually changes, not suddenly, but continuously. And when the world gets used to this, it might never go back to the way it was.